All right, final album, the first appearance, but not the last, of Dire Straits, which I know when I was a young kid, like in single digits, I thought Dire Straits was a person.
So did I.
Before I
Actually, John,
realized
I
that
agree.
A, Dire Straits was a concept as a thing, and B, Dire Straits was a band. So I got a lot of info all at once that
Yeah,
like Dire Straits was a term and a band. So yeah.
it was Mark Knopfler's, high school nickname.
And yep. And that was his nickname, Dire Straits.
No, I'm kidding.
I was about to say that'd be a bleak nickname. So
All right, let me run the numbers. I think then you go, John. So making movies from 1980 is Dire Straits comes in at number 87 on best ever albums in the 1980s, number 8 in 1980, number 571 of all time. It's Dire Straits' second highest rated album on best ever albums, coming in behind Brothers in Arms from 1985. So we're going to cover that in a future full episode. And I think that'll make this the only two Dire Straits albums that we will cover. Didn't make Rolling Stone's list, and so there you go. John, you go first.
okay, I'm going to start with one thing before I go in a totally different direction. In a week where most of the albums were pretty good or at least redeeming things, but also had a surprising amount of just truly offending songs, Lay Boys might be the worst of all of the songs. It's a absolutely awful song. And so I'm just going to pretend it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Because then I'm going to look at the rest of it from 1 through 6, and that's an incredibly good album. It really is. I deeply connect to the vibe of Dire Straits. I love the guitar work. I mean, there's tasty licks. This, like, Dire Straits, like, operates in the pocket. Like, they just have a pocket that I am going to climb in that pocket, and they're going to bridge into these hooks, and I'm just going to ride. It's like surfing. I know it's coming, right? I know that I'm going to get these guitar parts, and it's going to be that blues feel over and over again, where there's an intro, and then there's little blues guitar parts that are sort of interspersed in, kind of Clapton-y, right, where the guitar is talking to you, and then it's going to lead into this, like, very tight, very enjoyable hook, right, where the guitar and the bass and the drums all come together, and I love Mark Knopfler's voice. It's like he's like giving a stream of conscious. It isn't though, but like it seems like he's just in the moment making up the words as he's hearing this, where he's
like really relaxed delivery.
relaxed. It's like he's talking to you about whatever he's doing. He's just telling you the story, kind of. And the ultimate example of that is like Sultans of Swing, right, where like he's just sort of like expanding the story a little bit, and then he'll just down south London town, and then he like fades off and the guitar takes over, but then he finds you again. And I mean, Tunnel of Love, Espresso Love is an awesome song. Solid Rock. I mean, this one it hit me in my feels a little bit. Like there's something about Dire Straits that's a very comfortable part where I put it on and I kind of just blend into it. Like I said before, I describe it as kind of riding, like surfing the wave of what I know is coming song structure wise. And then he can take it long at times, right? And play it out blues style, or he can tighten it up and tie it off. And I love the fact that the formula he uses is malleable enough to do that, but also familiar enough that I know where it's going and I like where it's going. So all the pieces come together really, really well. There's an art to writing hooks, and Dire Straits just has tons of great hooks on this album and just in their career in general. So that's my initial thoughts. This one was my favorite of the 6 this week, for sure. I enjoyed this quite a bit. Mm-hmm.
This was I only knew Dire Straits from kind of the big songs, Sultans of Swing, Money for Nothing, and so this was a real enjoyable listen for me. Mark Knopfler has such a like distinct kind of delivery in his voice, and his guitar sound is so tied to his voice in my head, like knowing from those other songs. And then I hear it on here like all the time. And the thing that came to me when listening to this album is he's kind of like Lou Reed in a certain way, in terms of like how he sings the songs and delivers it. He has such a like unique kind of rhythm, especially in a song like Romeo and Juliet, where, and Matt, I think you said this about another band, where there's like so many lyrics that he's like trying to get in, but they don't he's delivering them and not like a normal way, or not with like the tempo or beat of the music. And that happens over and over again on this, and that ties into like the relaxed delivery that we were talking about before. It's so like interesting to hear, because it's just like it's not staccato, it's not like spoken word, but it's just like so singular and interesting. And kind of the other Lou Reed part is, he's writing not as like darker themes necessarily, but just kind of a storytelling nature to the songs, I think, on this album that I really appreciated. And at the end of the day, also the guitar is awesome. He's an awesome guitar player. The funny thing for me about Dire Straits is I always forget they're British and that he's British. So I just like,
they seem nationality-less, don't they? Like they don't seem like they're from anywhere.
Yeah. I don't know what their like influences are necessarily, but that's another thing that kind of makes
Clapton for sure. Clapton for sure.
Is I feel like they're not necessarily, in the same way we were talking about Bob Seger's definitely like blues rock. This is something adjacent to that. There's some other quality to it that I find really interesting. This is an album that I think I'm interested to hear other Dire Straits album, because I feel like Mark Knopfler is always one of those guys that comes up as like really underrated, or like really or an artist that's appreciated by other artists, or like one of those like underrated guitar players or something. And so I feel like that's going to come up for me hearing these other albums and like appreciating the band outside of those big hits. I really like this album too. I don't know if it was my favorite of the 6 this week, but it was definitely a really pleasurable listening experience.
Yeah, I'm with you, John. This is my favorite of the week, and I'm also with you that Les Boys is can be just throwaway. It's kind of like
I like the ragtime piano in that, though.
It's just like it's not neat. It's like when Pearl Jam put Bugs, on their on Vitalogy. It's just like, did you really need to do that? I don't think. They're just having fun. But I don't know, for an album that's 37 minutes, that's 4. So so it's really a 33 minute long album. But I love Dire Straits. Dire Straits is I would say that this is one of the first musical memories that I have of modern pop rock music as a kid. I mean, and we're going to talk about Brothers in Arms, but Money for Nothing, that video was MTV. That was the video. That was like anytime. That was like when that video came on, you had to stop what you were doing to go watch it, because it was like this amazing, the computer animation was like insane and all this stuff. And they were just...
Is that your number one MTV video? I'd put it in my top 5, in terms of most notable.
Probably, just because it was the first big one, and it came. And that album was like 85. I was 7, right? So
my one is always Aha, Take on Me, which was the same time period.
And
that
could be up. That was right. That was like a year later, I think. But I remember that was Dire Straits when that video. That was one of those things that was like, I don't think they ever play that. Like, it's like this hidden gem. Like, if you got to be able to watch it and find it at the right time, because it's not like they played it all the time. But anyway, so it's interesting for me because I want to say that Dire Straits is one of the most underrated bands of like great bands out there. But at the same time, Brothers in Arms was a huge album. That was like a huge, massive hit for them.
So was this.
And they've had other huge hits as well. Like Sultans of Swing was on from 78. That's like a quintessential Dire Straits album. They're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but it's also one of those. They're also one of those bands that just for whatever reason just kind of falls by the wayside when I think about like all-time great artists. And so when and I didn't know this album. The only albums that I know really are Brothers in Arms, and the only Dire Straits albums that I actually owned was Love Over Gold, which has one of my favorites. It's got Telegraph Road on it, which is like 15 minutes long, and that was one of my favorite long songs of all time. The jam at the end is just fantastic. So so I knew obviously Romeo and Juliet and Tunnel of Love, but I never heard of Espresso Love, and that was a hell of a song. You're absolutely right, John. The groove of that is just, as soon as you hear it, and I can't not dance it. It's just like there is staccato guitar playing, and it's just like, it's a very smart melody that's going on in there. It's a very calculated, very intelligent songwriting that's happening. And there's some great chord progressions, like Tunnel of Love. There's like a descending chorus chord progression that's happening right around the chorus, and it's just like, it's so well done. This is a really, really great band, and I don't think they get talked about enough. I think that's probably, I certainly don't talk about them enough, and I don't hear other people talking about them, but when I hear their music, I agree, John, it's hitting so many of the things that I love in rock music. The production is great. He plays the guitar with his thumb. You know what I mean? He doesn't like use a guitar pick at all. It's like all of his notes, every time you see him play, he's just like plucking along with his thumb. And it's just, I don't know, as a really shitty guitar player myself, like I can't imagine how, that's just got to be such a hard thing to do. But he's got a unique guitar tone, and a Mark Knopfler guitar when you hear it. Love his voice as well. You guys are right about that. And the band's great too. They're just really tight, really great rock songs. The slower ballad songs are really pretty as well. I can't say enough good things about them, and I wish we were covering the other. I think there were 2 albums before this, I think, because they had a couple albums in the 70s. And so I might just go back.
Communique, I think, is one of them, right? If I remember, my dad owned that.
And that one is actually, I can pull it up on Best Ever Albums here. That's Communique was from 1979, and then Dire Straits, their self-titled album, was from 78, and Love Over Gold was 82. So Love Over Gold came out after this, and then it was Brothers in Arms. So I can definitely vouch for Love Over Gold as well, but I think I'm going to go back and listen to the other 2. But I just listening to this, and there's a sound that reminds me of being a kid, and as probably the most nostalgic person on here, it's a good memory. So just big thumbs up on this. They're a fantastic band, and I think we need to talk about them more. Just hitting so many of the different things that I love in music.
Well, it's interesting because that analogy to Lou Reed was a great one. Josh, because there is Bob Dylan. There's a little Dylan in him too, like how he writes his songs, lyrically, and then guitar wise, Eric Clapton and the people that inspired Eric Clapton. I feel like that's his lineage, because there's a lot of Mark Knopfler's guitar tone is like Eric Clapton guitar tone. We haven't really done much Eric Clapton solo. We did Layla and Other Assorted Songs, and he's with Derek and the Dominoes and Cream. But in fact, I often put like Eric Clapton and Dire Straits kind of in the same lane, I think, in terms of what they were doing in the 80s. If you listen to Eric Clapton's 80s stuff, like very blues driven rock. But and then, it's kind of like they take that Eric Clapton blues with the influences and sort of the songwriting of a song style of Dylan and Lou Reed, and then they add their own element to it, which is this height. It's almost like kind of Tom Petty-ish in terms of how good they are at writing hooks. Not sound, right? But like they just have this. I mean, but with Tom Petty, the build up to it, you sing along with what he's singing in the chorus. I rarely find, and this is where I'm more like you, Matt, with Dire Straits. I rarely sing the lyrics to a Dire Straits songs as much as like I'm humming like dun 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 dun, like the guitar. Well, like it's just like Dire Straits to me is that like Sultans of Swing is like dun 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 dun, like I think of them as like progressions into these groovy choruses as opposed to just like, yes, if I think about it, I can go back to Espresso Love or, Sultans of Swing, but more it's like I'm hearing it as a byproduct of the groove. And I do think that Dire Straits sometimes gets thought as Mark Knopfler, and we've been guilty of that this time too, but the rest of the band's fantastic. And the rhythm section on this band is real good. And so I don't want to underestimate that, because if it was just him as an individual act, it wouldn't be nearly as effective as the full dressing on this. So I do want to make sure that I mentioned that these aren't like session players and Mark Knopfler. This is like a real tight outfit. So
that's true, but I still can't name any of the other guys.
Well, his brother was in the band for
that's right.
I think the first couple albums. So that's
Dave
what
Knopfler.
And I'm pretty sure what's his name? The bassist was his roommate. I know that. I'm looking it up. John Illsley is the bassist name, and he's very good too. And I know that he's well regarded as sort of an underrated the bassist and the style of complementary bassist. I always think of like, those complementary drummers like Alex Van Halen and Van Halen, right? And, Ringo, right? And John Illsley's like a lot of his bass is built around what Mark Knopfler's doing on guitar, but there's a skill to that too, being able to put that in and not overwhelming it. So yeah, I do want to mention that though, because it is a full unit.
No, I'm going to be excited to do because we are going to do a bio, so we'll get a little bit more of their story. But I did look up on this website Influence that tells kind of like influences and stuff, and so I'm not coming up with this, but I thought this was a good one. Richard Thompson was listed as an influence on Dire Straits, so that's definitely like the British, and he's a great guitarist as well, and he's kind of so that definitely. I see that tracking, too. And so was the Flamin' Groovies. That was listed as an influencing band.
I think sometimes they dig a little deep. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
I agree. There's other ones on here like the Kinks and Van Morrison, but Flamin' Groovies, it just made me laugh because I was like, oh, we covered them as well. So I
think sometimes like is the influence like what they listen to or what they sound like? Because sometimes what they listen to.
On this site, there's I don't think that they show like any. Yeah, any reasons why. They just say Bob Dylan, Eric Clapton, Randy Newman, Chet Atkins, Flamin'
Well,
Groovies.
the first two are clear. It's hard to. I mean, how can you have listened to what we've listened to and not get to those two things? I mean, my God. And like I said, I think Josh did a good pull with Lou Reed too.
Yeah, but, no, I see that too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, all right, strong thumbs up from all of us. It sounds like for